on collecting art and culture, explores the fate of tribal artifacts and cultural practices once they are relocated in Western museums, exchange systems, disciplinary archives, and discursive traditions. It proposes a critical historical approach to collecting, focusing on subjective, taxonomic, and political processes. The art-culture system through which exotic objects have been contextualized and given value in the West is further explored in the second part, where cultural description is presented as a form of collecting. The authenticity accorded to both human groups and their artistic work is shown to proceed from specific assumptions about temporality, wholeness, and continuity. The third part focuses on a revealing moment in the modern appropriation of non-Western works of art and culture, portrayed in several memoirs by Claude Levi Strauss of his wartime years in New York. A critical reading makes explicit the redemptive metahistorical narrative these memoirs presuppose. The general art-culture system supported by such a narrative is contested throughout the chapter, particularly in the fourth part, where alternative tribal histories and contexts are suggested. In the West, collecting has long been a strategy for the deployment of a possessive self, culture, and authenticity. Children's collections reveal the channelings of obsession, an exercise in how to make the world one's own, and how to gather things around oneself tastefully and appropriately. The inclusions in all collections reflect wider cultural rules of rational taxonomy, of gender, and of aesthetics. In Susan Stewart's gloss, the boundary between collection and fetishism is mediated by classification and display intention, with accumulation and secrecy. She explores certain recurrent strategies pursued by Westerners since the 16th century. She highlights the miniature, gigantism, the souvenir, and the collection, showing how collections, most notably museums, create the illusion of adequate representation of a world by first cutting objects out of specific contexts and making them stand for abstract wholes. The history of anthropology and modern art is crucial in understanding how social groups have appropriated exotic things, facts, and meanings. It is important to analyze how powerful discriminations made at particular moments constitute the general system of objects within which valued artifacts circulate and make sense. Cultural or artistic authenticity has as much to do with an inventive present as with a past, its objectification, preservation, or revival. The art world is a complex system that classifies objects and assigns them relative value, establishing four semantic zones: authentic masterpieces, authentic artifacts, inauthentic masterpieces, and inauthentic artifacts. These zones are located in various ways, such as old and new, rare and common, familiar and exotic, and can either be located in one or ambiguously in traffic between them. Regular movements toward positive value proceed from bottom to top and from right to left, selecting artifacts of enduring worth or rarity, usually guaranteed by a vanishing cultural status or by the selection and pricing mechanisms of the art market. An area of frequent traffic in the system is linking zones 1 and 2, where objects move in two directions along this path: cultural or historical value, may be promoted to the status of fine art, with examples of movement from ethnographic culture to fine art being plentiful. Art masterworks are culturally and historically contextualized, which has been occurring more and more explicitly. Occasional travel occurs between zones 4 and 3, for example when a commodity or technological artifact is perceived as a case of special inventive creation. Sometimes, objects fully enter the realm of art, passing through Zone 3 into Zone 1, such as furniture, household machines, cars, and so on, displayed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. The art-culture system in art and anthropology is strongly secular, with categories of art and culture, technology, and commodity being strongly secular. Religious objects can be valued as great art, folk art, or cultural artifact, but their specific power or sacredness is relocated to a general aesthetic realm. The categories of the beautiful, the cultural, and the authentic have changed and are changing, making it important to resist the tendency of collections to be self-sufficient and suppress their own historical, economic, and political processes of production. Culture collecting has become increasingly difficult due to the interconnectedness of societies and the increased pace of historical change. The concrete activity of representing a culture, subculture, or coherent domain of collective activity is always strategic and selective. The increased pace of historical change and the common recurrence of stress in the systems under study forces a new self-consciousness about the way cultural wholes and boundaries are constructed and translated. The art-culture system in art and anthropology excludes and marginalizes various residual and emergent contexts. It is essential to resist the tendency of collections to be self-sufficient and consider the historical, economic, and political processes of production. Ethnography is a form of culture collecting that involves selecting, gathering, and detached from their original temporal occasions to give enduring value in a new arrangement. The recent history of culture has been marked by its alliance with art, which functions as an art-culture system. This system allows for all learned human behavior and orders phenomena in ways that privilege the coherent, balanced, and authentic aspects of shared life. The concept of authenticity in Western culture and art has long been rooted in expectations of wholeness, continuity, and essence. Raymond Williams provides a starting point in the early 19th century, tracing a parallel development in usage for the words art and culture. In the 18th century, the word art meant predominantly skill, while culture designated a tendency to natural growth. Its use is predominantly agricultural and personal. By the 1820s, art increasingly designated a special domain of creativity, spontaneity, and purity, a realm of refined sensibility and expressive genius. The artist was set apart from, often against society. Culture followed a parallel course, coming to mean what was most elevated, sensitive, essential, and precious most uncommon in society. Like art, culture became a general category. Williams calls it a final court of appeal against threats of vulgarity and leveling. Art and culture emerged after 1800 as mutually reinforcing domains of human value. strategies for gathering, marking off, and protecting the best and most interesting creations of man. In the 20th century, the plural, anthropological definition of culture emerged as a liberal alternative to racist classifications of human diversity. It was a sensitive means for understanding different and dispersed whole ways of life in a high colonial context of unprecedented global interconnection. In the early 20th century, an increasing number of exotic, primitive, or archaic objects came to be seen as art, equal in aesthetic and moral value with the greatest Western masterpieces. By mid-century, the new attitude toward primitive art had been accepted by large numbers of educated Europeans and Americans. From the standpoint of the late 20th century, the parallel concepts of art and culture did successfully comprehend and incorporate a plethora of non-Western artifacts and customs. This was accomplished through two strategies. Objects reclassified as primitive art were admitted to the imaginary museum of human creativity, and though more slowly, to the actual fine arts museums of the West. The art cult authenticity system articulates considerable domains of truth and scientific progress, as well as areas of blindness and controversy. The modern genealogy of culture and art increasingly appears to be a local story, with culture and art no longer being simply extended to non-Western peoples and things. Levi Strauss and the refugee surrealists were passionate collectors of Northwest Coast, Melanesian, and Eskimo artifacts. The category of primitive art emerged in the 1920s, with its market, connoisseurship, and close ties to modernist aesthetics. In wartime New York, the battle to gain widespread recognition for tribal objects was not yet won. The collecting of Levi Strauss and the Surrealists during the 1940s was part of a struggle to gain aesthetic status for these increasingly rare masterworks. Modern practices of art and culture collecting, scientific and avant-garde, have situated themselves at the end of a global history. They anticipate humanity's entropic future and gather its diverse pasts in decontextualized, collectible forms. In New York, a jumble of humanity has washed up in one vertiginous place and time, to be grasped simultaneously in all its precious diversity and emerging uniformity. In this chronotope, the pure products of humanity's pasts are rescued by modern aesthetics only as sublimated art. They are salvaged by modern anthropology as consultable archives for thinking about the range of human invention. The chronotope of New York supports a global allegory of fragmentation and ruin. The modern anthropologist, lamenting the passing of human diversity, collects and values its survivals, its enduring works of art, the most prized acquisition from a marvelous New York, where everything seemed available, was a nearly complete set of volumes, 148 of the annual reports of the Bureau of American Ethnology. The author discusses the appropriation of non-Western objects and cultural records in art and culture collecting, emphasizing the importance of resisting deep-seated habits of mind and systems of authenticity. She also emphasizes the need to resist the tendency to relegate non-Western peoples and objects to the pasts of an increasingly homogeneous humanity. The currency of tribal artifacts is becoming more visible to non-Indians, and many new tribal recognition claims are pending at the Department of the Interior. These claims manifest the historical and political reality of Indian survival and resurgence, impinging on Western art and culture collections. The proper place of many objects in museums is now subject to contest, as the Zuni who prevented the loan of their war god to the Museum of Modern Art challenged the dominant art culture system. Resourceful Native American groups may still appropriate the Western Museum, as they have made their own European institution. The tribe, old objects may again participate in a tribal present becoming future, and some old texts collected by salvage ethnography are now being recycled as local history and tribal literature. The objects of both art and culture collecting are susceptible to other appropriations, as they are susceptible to other appropriations.